Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of How I Conquered Cancer and Beyond. Today, I will be interviewing Judy Pearson. She's an award winning writer with degrees in French, English, and psychology. She is the founder of a nonprofit organization called A Second Act that supports and celebrates women survivors of all cancers as they use their gifts of time and experience to give back to the greater good. And let me tell you, she is an amazing person. And I am so privileged and so honored that she will be sharing how she conquered cancer and how it's changed her life. Welcome, Judy, and thank you so much for doing this with me.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Of course. So, Judy, my first question to you is at what age were you diagnosed with cancer, and what went through your mind when you heard those dreaded words, you have cancer?
I was 55, and it's really a very funny story. So my daughter-in-law and grandchildren were visiting from England. My son is military, and they were stationed there, and he had to go somewhere else in Europe, so they came to the States for a couple of weeks. So the whole diagnosis process happened while they were there, and my husband was not in the house, but my daughter-in-law and I were making a grocery list when the doctor called and said, although she kind of let me know at the biopsy, listen, this is really serious. But she called and said, it is cancer, it's triple negative breast cancer, it's very aggressive, you need to get this treated immediately. So I hung up and I said to my daughter-in-law, it's cancer. And she said, what should we do? And I said, go to the grocery store. Yeah. And so we did. We went grocery shopping.
Yeah.
And when we got home, my husband had returned, and I said, it's cancer. But there weren't lots of tears. It was really funny. It was just, okay, so this is what we'll do next.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
You know?
It took a while for it to totally sink in.
Yeah, and I totally get it, because when I got that phone call, I so remember clearly. I just drove into my garage and the phone rang, and I knew what she was going to say, because kind of had that feeling, right? And she says, oh, it is cancer. And I was like, okay, I better go get my arms waxed, because I'm not going to have time to do this anymore.
Lots of personal hygiene maintenance.
Right? So I love that you just went grocery shopping, and that's exactly how I was as well. And I just love the positivity that you radiate, Judy.
Thank you.
It really gives me the hope, and I think it just helps us radiate that positivity to other people, other women who are probably going to be getting diagnosed, and they just need to know that it's not the end of life.
That's right.
Right?
It seems like it at the time, but even if you're diagnosed with stage 4 disease, it seems almost like every day there are new discoveries, new treatments, new modalities, so it isn't the end. There's a long ways from the end. But can I just add one other thing?
Absolutely.
So after dinner that night, kids are in bed, my husband was up in our bedroom, and my daughter-in-law and I did the worst thing you can do when you get diagnosed. We Googled. And I don't think we Googled the cancer at that moment. We Googled mastectomy scars and reconstruction. And of course, nobody says, look how beautiful my reconstruction is. Everybody says, oh, I had 50 surgeries and I got one wonky boob up here and one down there. And we started crying. I got physically sick. I mean, it was just, I really did. I went in the bathroom and threw up. It was just awful. So remember that.
Yes.
The internet is a mile wide and an inch deep, and only the bad news makes news. The good news never does.
And that is so true.
Yeah.
And I did not do any research. I told my husband, I was like, do all the research you want, but do not share information with me, because all of us are different.
That's right.
The way we deal with it, the way we will go through our
process
journey.
it.
Yeah,
exactly.
And if we sit there in anticipation, I feel like you're going to bring it onto yourself.
Absolutely.
Right?
So your next project after this is interviewing women willing to show you their reconstruction, so that your audience can see it's not all bad. Because if women are willing to show it, it's good. Okay, sorry for the aside.
I might opt to do that, but I don't know. It isn't that bad, to be honest.
No.
You know, I mean, I have a boob and bob.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a foob.
Oh,
A fake boob. It's a foob.
But I got my body fat transferred, so
Oh,
it's
man, I
not
couldn't
really
do that.
fake.
Yeah.
How long ago was your diagnosis?
This is hard to even imagine. It will be 9 years in a couple of months.
Wow.
And I know we're going to talk about what I've done since my diagnosis, but I met a young woman as a result of that who was also triple negative, which is rare. Typically, it's women of color, younger women, and women of Ashkenazi Jewish descent. I know for a fact I'm not the first two, and I don't think I'm the third. And so it's very aggressive and doesn't have a great prognosis if it's discovered in later stages.
Mm-hmm.
This young woman was just so thrilled to meet somebody who was, I think at the time I met her, I was 5 years out or maybe 4 years out. And so now when I think that, wow, almost 9 years out from this really rare cancer, a relatively rare cancer, I'm really thrilled. God's not done with me yet.
Yeah. You're doing big things, Judy. Not done yet.
I have to teach everybody else how to do it first.
Yeah, I know, it's so funny because I was talking to my parents yesterday and my mom's like, are you going for your checkups? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And I was like, Mom, I still have a lot of big things to do. I'm not done yet. I'm like, this is just the beginning for me. So it's like, don't worry.
Absolutely. Good for you.
Yeah. So that is amazing. So Judy, let's just talk a little bit about how did cancer change your life?
Well, so my diagnosis came, and the reason I think I wasn't terribly terrified about it came 2 months after I found the lump, 2 months after a clean mammogram.
Okay.
And I have since learned a great deal about dense breast tissue. At the time, there was still a great deal of controversy about requiring radiology reports to tell women that, because you get the happygram from the mammography that says, good news, you're good, see you next year. But what they don't tell you is, if you do, you have dense tissue, mammography can't see through the dense tissue, and you should go for further diagnostics, which would be an ultrasound. So when I found this lump, I was scratching the middle of my chest, kind of almost my cleavage, and I felt this lump. And we were watching TV, and I said to my husband, feel this. Men will feel your boobs if you ask them.
Yeah.
And so he was like, yeah, that's new. And it was just a shock. And it took another 4 to 6 weeks to get to the diagnosis, because there's all the steps that you have to take.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that. And then the other part that was so curious, and as a nonfiction writer, a biographer, I'm always looking for the unusual elements of humans that, you know, make a story really good. My mother's sister, her only sister, my mother was already deceased. Her only sister also had triple negative breast cancer, and she was 14 years older than I was, or 13 years older than I was. She was a bit of a recluse, had never had a mammogram, was very, very thin, and when I read her medical records, I knew she was a goner walking in. It metastasized soon after. And so I thought, wow, so there's some reason that I found this. I wonder what that's going to be. And then when they did the mastectomy, they found other tumors in my breast. So then I really thought, okay, I have been saved for a reason. Yes. I have a new favorite quote from artist Marie Cassatt. She said it to the survivor of the Lusitania. If you survived, it is because there is more for you to do in the world. And that's how I looked at it, is, okay, I'm going to do something. Yeah. So I was researching for a book previous to cancer, and I was looking at volunteering benefits. And a lot of research had been done on volunteering. It makes you feel better, it reduces stress, it helps manage chronic illness, and researchers have found that in the elderly, it actually extends life. And when I saw that post-cancer, I kind of put it together and thought, wow, volunteering and survivorship. So then I wanted to know what people were doing with their survivorship.
Yeah.
Volunteered for an organization, learned a lot about the nonprofit world, and then launched my own nonprofit. But the biggest thing I think that we seek is, and humans are hardwired to make this happen, we seek to find purpose in things that happen to us. If you put your hand in the fire and you get burned, you learn, don't put hand in fire. Note to self. And so the same is true with something like cancer.
Yeah.
When people say, why me? It's not always, oh, poor me, why me? It's like, so why me? Why not someone else? What is its purpose in my life? And that really sent me on a grand journey.
I love that. That's exactly how I looked at everything. That there was a purpose for it.
Yeah.
And I actually love that. But my whole thing, what I want to tell everyone is, you don't need to have a life-changing event like cancer or something to realize what it is your purpose is.
That's
or
right.
to be able to even get the courage to get up and go and do.
And your purpose can change.
It can.
Absolutely.
And life is short. It doesn't have to be cancer. It doesn't have to. It could take a second and your life would change.
Yeah.
But why are we all waiting for that one event to come and change our life and remind us
That's right.
that, you know what, we're here to do a purpose. We are all here to do.
That's right. It's like, use the good china, use the good sheets. Don't put them in
Yes.
cupboards for that time or for
Yeah.
good. Now is good. This is good. Today is good.
Because today is all you have.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
we don't know
right.
if tomorrow will come.
Exactly.
And yesterday's already gone.
That's right.
Oh, I love that. I just love your energy, Judy.
Oh, no you, no you.
Oh my God. So let's talk a little bit about your nonprofit. It's called Second Act,
Yeah.
and I'm so excited for it. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I already explained then the idea of connecting,
Mhm.
volunteering, and cancer survivorship. And since that momentous brainstorm, which I thought was a brainstorm, but there were people ahead of me, I have made a very good friend who's a professor at Wake Forest in North Carolina, who is actually doing research on post-traumatic growth among breast cancer survivors. Now, obviously, post-traumatic growth can happen with any cancer,
Yeah.
but she is specializing in breast cancer survivors. So, I was just intrigued by what women were doing, regardless of what kind of cancer they had,
Mhm.
regardless of what stage. By helping others, they were healing themselves. So I was volunteering for this other organization, met another volunteer who was fabulous, and the first year for our big annual event, I kind of coined the phrase Second Act, and we asked women to submit in writing their stories, and my friend Joanna made a big board where people could go and read them, and when the weekend came, that board, that wall really, had more attention than anything else. It was like the Vietnam Memorial. Women were standing there and pointing and crying and hugging, and we thought, wow, we're onto something. The next year, Joanna had been invited to be in a stage performance that was a storytelling event about motherhood. And she said, let's make this a performance. So we did. So then I left, she and I both left that organization. Her cancer returned and she died. And I said to my husband, I am going to give life to this whole concept. So I created a Second Act for the sole purpose of celebrating and supporting women survivors anywhere of all cancers who are giving back to the greater good, using their life and their experience to give back. And it doesn't have to be a cancer-related give back. It doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to create an organization. It can be random acts of kindness. We call that a free-spirited Second Act.
Yeah.
And my thought was, I'm going to raise money through storytelling events and then make micro grants to women survivors who want to launch or grow their second acts. Backstage at my very first storytelling event, 2 of the cast members ran up and said, this should be a book. So we said, okay, we made it into a book, another way to raise money. Now we've got it so down pat that we have the book ready to sell at the performance where the latest cast members are speaking. There are always 32 stories in the book, so the most senior cast rolls off, but their volumes are always for sale. And then I thought, well, some women may not know what their second act is. I started out life as a teacher, and then began speaking about women, about courage and women's courage and how it differs from men's courage. Did workshops. So I took a lot of that information and created a workshop for survivors. But then I thought, okay, so my sphere isn't big enough. There's the women who've been on our stages and the audience, but I need people to know I'm not scary. I'm not going to make them take off their shirts, despite what I just suggested. And so we do quarterly girls' night out events as well, which on the outside might look just like frivolous parties or happy hours, but they are such healing networking events. There's no program, there's no speaker, there's just a little wine, some munchies, our signature cupcakes, and a whole lot of veterans guiding the rookies. So all the money that we raise then allows us to do the workshops, the Girls' Night Out, and our annual microgrants.
Yeah, and
It's a whole package.
It is. I love it, and I've attended your workshop. And for me, in your workshop, what stood out the most is that you had a list of, okay, what did cancer take away from you?
No, you guys made the list.
Sorry, we
Yes.
made the list. Your question was, what did
You're right.
cancer take away from you? And we had to pick out a couple of things. And I consider myself lucky. For me, I think it taught me a lot of things, so it really didn't take away anything from me. I think the only one thing it did take away from me was I had just bought a business before I got diagnosed. So, timing was, not with me, of course, and I had to give up the business and obviously did not do good. So for me, I think finances was it. But I love the fact that you are giving these microgrants, because you know what, we tend to forget that cancer can affect your career in such a big
my
way.
gosh,
And a
so
lot of
much.
women can't work anymore.
That's
or
right.
do what they were doing. And it's really hard for you to go back and find a way to
Yeah.
survive.
It's called the financial toxicity of cancer.
Yes.
So in addition to physical toxicity and emotional toxicity, you absolutely have the potential for facing financial toxicity. And up until the late 80s, not only did situations as the one you just described exist, but the discrimination against cancer survivors was rampant. You could seriously be fired if you disclosed either a current cancer diagnosis or a previous cancer diagnosis. People thought it was contagious. You could catch it. They thought it was a contagious disease. And so the book that I'm currently working on, called From Shadows to Life, deals with the history of the survivorship movement and how a small group of survivors started to change all these elements, and discrimination was a big one. There's a very sad story, in fact, in the book. A woman was at one of their annual events and got up and spoke and said, Monday, I have to go declare bankruptcy, because this was now by the mid-90s. And she said, I can't, if I stay married I have to get divorced, and then I'm going to declare bankruptcy. If I stay divorced to my husband, I will ruin our family. So she had to divorce her husband and then declare bankruptcy. So it's not a shameful thing. What we do is just a small example of what you can find. There are lots of resources to help with financial toxicity.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge thing, that women should just know that there are ways to help you out and move
Absolutely.
forward.
You're never alone,
Yes.
ever.
And that was my whole reason to start this YouTube channel, because you just never know whose story can help someone else
Yep.
see the light. And also for me, the biggest thing that really stuck out was when we are getting our treatments done, we're going to the doctors, we have the doctors and nurses and everyone with us. Once we're done with that last chemo treatment, the doctor says, okay, I'll see you in 6 months, life should be back to normal.
Bye.
And you're just looking around thinking, wait, I am not coming back here next week to have my chemo treatment, and
To be checked out and
like, is everything okay, and what is normal? Because life is never going to be normal again. We have to now figure out our new normal.
That's right.
So how were you able to figure out your new normal?
I think that, so first of all, I was sharing with you earlier, I was a newlywed. I had just found, after two missteps, the man of my dreams. So if you're looking for him, ladies, he's not available. I have it. And it was just shortly before I was diagnosed. He was so wonderful. My parents were deceased, but his parents are still alive, and they were wonderful support. My sons were grown, they were great support. I had cancer in the best of circumstances. But I did mourn some things. You know, there were people who were there for me and people who completely disappeared. And I was shocked. I've had people get mad at me before and disappear, but the fact that I had cancer had caused this change in our relationships. That was tough and completely unexpected. We rebuilt in most cases, but it was not unexpected. I think the physical part of it, again, my reconstruction was great. I just, it took a while to get used to taking my shirt off and going, oh, what happened to you? And I think that the hair thing, I had nice hair. It was about your length. I liked it fine. I didn't like wearing a wig or scarves, so I lived in the Midwest during my cancer treatment. So in the summertime, I just was bald. I wore a hat so I didn't get sunburned. In the winter, I wore a hat to keep warm. The hair, having short hair, was such a fun thing. So that was a good thing. But I think it took me a couple of years to look back, and especially after talking to my sweet husband, David, and I'd say to him, somebody would say to me that they had a certain feeling during cancer, and I would say to him later that day or that night, did I feel that way? And he'd say, yeah, you really did. And so I guess I guess there were things that I went through that I didn't realize. And it's important, very important, to give yourself time to grieve. It's no different than the loss of a loved one or a divorce. Going through something as traumatic as any health challenge, but cancer is still the scariest word in the world. It just takes time to grieve through that, and grief is not on a timeline. It just is what it is. So but I can say unequivocally, my life is 1,000 times better. And every time we do those storytelling performances, there's always one, at least, and there is again in this year's cast, a woman, a survivor, who says, cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. And that sounds really just totally off base, but it's really true. It really is. And David says, and again, it's because he's the most wonderful man in the world, he always says, I married a woman who was a great writer and a great public speaker, and now I'm married to just this phenomenal woman who has found her purpose.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think the support of someone like your husband is so important. I think that makes you feel like you could conquer the world.
Absolutely.
I was lucky enough to have the same support from my husband. The first thing I told him was, just don't baby me. I was like, I've got this is my fight, and I'm going to have to fight it on my own.
Right.
And all I want is for you to just stand by my side.
Right.
And I think that's the most important thing that we could get.
Yeah. And in case any of you are going through it, people would say to me, what can I do for you? And of course, when you're in the midst of it, you've got all these doctors and everybody's taking care of you. My answer was always, take care of David. Take him out for dinner, take him to the movie, go have a play date.
Yeah.
So don't forget your caregivers when people say, what can I do for you?
Yeah, that is so true. That is so true. Well, Judy, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It's always lovely talking with you, and I just love hearing that passion that you have and the positivity, and that's what this is about, is to just show the positive side of everything, and give that little bit of hope that
Absolutely.
we all just need to grab onto and get us through this unwanted
right.
journey of cancer.
That's right. Thank you
There
so
you
much.
have it, people. I just hear this time and time again, that love really conquers all. She was so fortunate to have the support of her family and to see the positive side of the cancer. So if you are starting your journey, please know you are not alone, and that there are so many of us women here who are ready to support you and show you that there is hope after cancer. And for anyone who's going through a tough time in your life, just remember, nothing lasts forever. Thank you, and have a beautiful day.